In 1961, a Soviet doctor cut open his own stomach and removed his own appendix. He was awake the whole time. There was no one else on the entire continent who could do it for him. His name is Leonid Rogozov. He is 27 years old, lying half, turned onto his left side in a single-story hut buried in Antarctic snow, a small mirror angled over his stomach, a scalpel in his right hand. And the reason he is holding that scalpel is the strangest part of the whole story. Go back 6 months. It is September 1960, and Rogozov is a general practitioner, 26 years old, still in the middle of his surgical training in Leningrad. He interrupts that training to volunteer for something enormous: the 6th Soviet Antarctic expedition. He will be the only physician for a team of 13 men at a brand new base called Novolazarevskaya. On the edge of a continent almost nobody has touched. You have to understand what "only physician" means down there. It does not mean the nearest hospital is far away. It means there is no hospital. It means that if a man breaks his leg, Rogozov sets it. If a man's heart stops, Rogozov is the last line. And it means one more thing, a thing nobody thinks about when they sign up. If the doctor himself gets sick, there is no one to treat the doctor. The ship reaches Antarctica. The men build the station out of prefabricated panels on the bare ice. And then in March 1961, the door of the continent closes. The polar night begins. The temperature drops past anything you have ever felt. Blizzards make flight impossible for months. They are, in the most complete sense of the word, alone. For a while, that is fine. The work is hard but ordinary. Then, on the morning of the 29th of April, Rogozov wakes up feeling wrong. It starts as weakness. A general malaise, the kind you would shrug off on any normal day. Then nausea. Then a low fever. And then the pain arrives, and it arrives in a place he recognizes immediately. Because he is a doctor and he has felt for this exact spot on 100 other bodies. The pain settles into the lower right quadrant of his abdomen. He knows. Before anyone else in that hut has any idea, he already knows exactly what is wrong. Acute appendicitis. Here is what you need to sit with for a moment. Appendicitis is not mysterious. In any city in the world, it is a routine problem with a routine fix. A surgeon makes a small cut, removes an inflamed appendix, and you go home in a few days. Thousands of people have it removed every single day, and never think about it again. It is one of the most ordinary operations there is. Unless you are the surgeon and the patient, and you are on the far side of a frozen planet with no one to hand the knife to. Rogozov did everything a careful doctor is supposed to do first. He rested. He tried to treat it conservatively, without cutting, antibiotics, cold on the abdomen, waiting, hoping the inflammation would settle on its own. He was not reckless. He was a man desperately trying to avoid the thing he could already see coming. But the appendix does not negotiate. Over the next day and a half, it got worse, not better. His temperature climbed. The vomiting became more frequent. And a new fear moved into his mind, one that changed the entire equation: perforation. Let me explain why that word is the whole story. An inflamed appendix, left alone, does not just stay inflamed. It swells until it bursts. And when it bursts, it spills infection out into the abdominal cavity, and that becomes peritonitis. And in 1961, on a base with no surgical support, peritonitis was a death sentence. The clock was no longer about pain. It was about the exact moment the appendix would rupture and turn a survivable illness into a fatal one. On the evening of the 30th of April, Rogozov made the calculation no doctor should ever have to make about his own body. He wrote it in his diary. "I'm getting worse," I told my comrades. And then, in that small buried hut, he decided to open himself up. Think about what that decision actually requires. Not the courage of it, though there is plenty. Think about the physical impossibility of it. A surgeon operating on a patient stands over them, looks down, uses both hands freely, has a whole team watching the vital signs. Rogozov would have none of that. He could not stand over himself. He could not fully see the wound. He could not use anesthesia that would knock him out, because if he lost consciousness, there was no one to finish the job or bring him back. So he built a team out of men who had never held a surgical instrument in their lives. A meteorologist named Alexander Artemev, a mechanic named Zinovy Teplinsky, and the station director, Vladislav Gerbovich, kept in reserve for one specific reason: in case one of the other two fainted and had to be replaced, Rogozov washed them himself, disinfected their hands himself, pulled the sterile gloves onto their fingers himself. He assigned Artemiev to hand him instruments. He assigned Teplinsky to hold a mirror and aim the lamp. And then he did the most chilling piece of preparation of all. He filled syringes with drugs and taught these 3 untrained men what to inject into his body and how to keep him breathing if he passed out on the table. Remember the mirror from the very beginning of this story. Here is where it comes back, and here is where it betrays him. Rogozov positioned himself semi-reclined, hip raised, body tilted about 30 degrees, so he could reach his own abdomen. Around 2 in the morning, he injected a weak solution of Novocaine into the abdominal wall, local anesthetic, just enough to dull the surface, never enough to risk his consciousness. Which means for the deep work, the work inside, he would feel a great deal of it. Then he made the cut, a clean incision 10 to 12 centimeters long, into his own flesh. And the mirror failed him almost at once. Everything in a mirror is reversed. Reach left and your hand goes right. For a man trying to navigate his own opened abdomen, that reversal was worse than useless. So Rogozov made a decision that is almost impossible to comprehend. He abandoned the mirror. He put his fingers into his own body and operated by touch, working blind. Feeling for the diseased organ with his bare hands, because gloves made his fingers too clumsy to read what they were touching. Every few minutes, the world would swim. Weakness and nausea would rise up, his own body in revolt against what he was doing to it. He would stop, close his eyes, breathe, wait for it to pass, then reach back in. At one point his fingers slipped, and he nicked the wall of his own intestine, the cecum, and had to stop and stitch that damage before he could go any further. Down the hall, in his own diary that night, Gerbovich would write about the sound of it, the gurgle of Rogozov's intestines as he worked, a sound that made the assistants want to turn and flee. Artemiev and Teplinsky both went gray and dizzy and nearly dropped where they stood, but they held. Sweat ran down Rogozov's face, and he kept asking Teplinsky to wipe it away so it would not fall into the wound. And then, near the bottom of the incision, his fingers closed around it. Finally, here it is, he wrote later. The Cursed Appendage. He had found the thing that was trying to kill him. When he pulled it free and looked at it, he understood exactly how close the clock had come. There was a dark stain at its base, a 2-centimeter perforation already forming. His own medical judgment was blunt. It would have burst within a day. He had opened himself up in the last hours before the point of no return. He resected the appendix. He placed antibiotics directly into the abdominal cavity to fight the infection already trying to take hold. And near 4 in the morning, after roughly 2 hours of cutting into his own body, with 3 terrified amateurs at his side, Leonid Rogozov closed the wound and finished the operation. Then he cleaned up, took a mild sedative, and slept. Here is the part that almost sounds invented. It worked. Within 5 days his fever was gone. On the 7th day he removed his own stitches. Within 2 weeks he was back on his feet, and back to his ordinary duties. The doctor of the station again, as if the continent had simply handed him back his life. Now pull back, because this is where the story stops being about one frozen hut and starts being about something inside you. We tell stories like this and reach for the word heroism. And there is heroism in it. But watch what Rogozov actually did, because it reveals something about how human beings survive that is easy to miss. He did not summon a burst of superhuman feeling. He did the opposite. He narrowed. He wrote afterward that he did not permit himself to think about anything except the task in front of his hands. Not the fear, not the odds, not the mirror, not the fainting men, not the 1,000 miles of ice. Just the next cut. Then the next. The mind under extreme threat does not always need to be brave. Sometimes it just needs to become very, very small, to shrink the impossible thing down to one manageable movement, and then the next one. You have felt a version of this on a scale that has nothing to do with scalpels. The moment so overwhelming that the only way through it was to stop looking at the whole of it and just do the single next thing. Answer the one email. Take the one step. Get through the 1 hour. That instinct to narrow your focus until the unbearable becomes a series of bearable pieces. That is not weakness. On the ice, in the dark, It was the exact machinery that kept a man alive while his own hands were inside him. There is a colder truth underneath the triumph, too. Rogozov survived a situation that never should have existed. The Soviet planners had sent a single doctor to a remote station with no way to evacuate him, a foreseeable risk they simply had not solved. His extraordinary act was the correction to someone else's ordinary oversight. And afterward, the policy changed. Extensive medical screening became mandatory before anyone was posted to those stations, precisely so no one would ever have to hold that mirror again. Rogozov himself refused, for the rest of his life, to be turned into a legend. When people tried to praise him, he would smile and give the same flat answer. A job like any other. A life like any other. He carried on as a surgeon back in Leningrad, and he almost never spoke of the night on the ice unless someone asked him directly. In 1961, a Soviet doctor cut open his own stomach, awake, with a useless mirror above him and 3 fainting amateurs at his side, because there was no one else on the entire continent who could do it for him. He did not think of himself as brave, and maybe that is the point. He was simply doing the one thing in front of him, and then the next, until the impossible was behind him. The next time something in your life looks too big to survive, you might remember the doctor who cut himself open at the bottom of the world and did it one small movement at a time.